Today I've got for you guys the best console settings for the Modern Warfare 2 Beta. In previous COD games on console, we've had very few graphical or gameplay settings that we as players can fine-tune to improve our gameplay experience. But it looks like for Modern Warfare 2, the devs have listened to us and added in some very highly requested settings. So let's crack on with this. Firstly, I wanted to show you the quick settings area, which is a brand new thing which they've added in, and I really like what they're doing here. If you've got settings that you find that you change quite a lot, these will be things like sensitivities or maybe some little graphical bits and pieces or some gameplay bits and pieces that you do change a decent amount of time. You don't want to have to go down into the deeper areas of the settings to find them. You can now just find the setting in the menu, press the triangle button, and it'll add it here. Let's show an example. Let's go to the controller area, go to our button layout preset and press triangle. A little star now appears on that setting, and if I go back to the quick settings, it is now in there. Button layout preset has been added, so now I can quickly switch all my button layouts on the fly. Don't need to go down into the lower sections of the settings. Really, really cool. So in this video, we're going to be skipping the controller settings. If you want details on sensitivity and aim assist and stuff like that, that's all covered in a different video that I've released. It's linked down in the description. You can watch it after you've watched through all this video, get all this stuff all detailed together in one nice package. So today we're starting off with graphics, which we've actually got a bunch of settings for on console, starting with on-demand texture streaming, which we are definitely turning off. What this actually does is it is a setting which makes it so that while you're playing the game, it actually downloads these high quality textures and kind of displays them on the screen. And it's not a good thing to have on. It can really eat up bandwidth and it can actually affect performance of your game on your console, so definitely not something we want on. Next, move to world motion blur. Definitely turn this off, along with weapon motion blur. Weapon motion blur, it can look a little bit cinematic, but for us guys who are actually trying to win games and get a lot of kills and play better, we definitely don't want motion blur on. Film grain, similar thing to motion blur. It's a cinematic effect which for some reason is turned on by default. No, turn it off, along with depth of field as well. This makes it so that things that are further away become blurry. It simulates like a camera lens. We do not want that. We want everything on the screen to be as sharp as possible. And speaking of sharpness, we have access to Fidelity FX CAS, or Contrast Adaptive Sharpening, in Modern Warfare 2. You definitely want to turn this on. This is an AMD bit of tech that really pushes the sharpness of your game. It's going to be a personal preference thing. Some people find that certain settings could be too sharp or too blurry. I'd recommend that everyone turns this on and starts off at 50, jumps in a game, and then you can decide if you want to turn this up or down to get a more sharp image or a slightly less sharp image. I've started at 50 and it's been pretty nice for me. I don't feel like I need to change it. Console players can now rejoice and say, hallelujah, we have an FOV slider. So what I want you guys to do, and really cherish this moment, is put this all the way up to 120 FOV. We ain't staying at 80 FOV. This is going to make it so that there's no longer really an advantage in terms of FOV for PC players. Turning this to the max gives you the maximum amount of information on your screen. It will make the game feel a lot faster, a lot less sluggish. Really awesome to see we finally have an FOV slider. And you definitely want it maxed out, unless for some reason you think this is too big, but I'd recommend you start off at 120. Then press the square button or the X button, whatever it is, to open up these extra buttons, extra settings below, and make sure ADS FOV is set to affected. The reason for this is because if we leave it at independent, when we ADS, we will get really zoomed in. Essentially, we'll go back to that really low FOV that we had prior to changing our FOV above. By setting this to affected, we actually get a wider FOV while zooming in, which does a couple of things. Number one, it means we keep that amount of information that we've gained from adding more FOV. You know, we can see far more at the edges of our screen. It will also make your gun look like it recoils less. It will give it less visual recoil on the screen. It's not actually lowering the recoil. Don't worry, it's not that broke, but it definitely makes a gun feel far better to use. So put this to affected. And then weapon field of view, I would recommend you leave this at default. What this appears to do, it's a new setting. It changes the screen space taken by the weapon. Just leave this at default. Unless you find that you try these two out and you like them, default's going to be the best because that's just how the game is meant to look. The other two potentially will look a little bit weird. I haven't really dived into them. I think you should just leave it as default. And then third person FOV, well, this is going to come down to really how much you're going to play the third person mode. I'm definitely going to give it a decent shot, and it might become a really fun mode that I like playing. I would recommend you turn this all the way to the max, which currently is 90 FOV. FOV is not as important in third person because you've already got kind of a wider area you're looking at from the third person view, but 90 FOV just gives you as much information as possible. And vehicle field of view, I'd recommend you leave that at default. There's currently no settings I can find for audio mixes in the beta, so I would actually recommend that you just leave all of the audio settings at default, except for potentially things like voice chat or mic volume if you're using those and you want to change those, but everything else I would just leave at default. And then moving on to the interface section, a couple of cool things we can change here. Firstly, come down to color customization, and for color filter, put this on filter 2 and put the color filter target to both. This actually makes a lot of the colors pop more in the game. Now, this game is already pretty vibrant, but I found that filter 2 just adds that little bit of extra niceness to the colors of the game, and putting this to both means that it affects both the interface and the actual world in which you're playing in. A nice little change. Minimap shape, by default it's at square. Make sure you leave it at square. I've covered this before. If you have a round minimap rather than a square one, you actually get less information on the minimap because you don't get those corners of the square. They just get cut off, and you lose out on so much information from UAVs and the radar in general, so leave that at square. And then finally, as a bonus tip, there is telemetry that you can turn on and off. You can turn on your server latency. I'd recommend, if you have any problems with internet or you're trying to diagnose things, you can come in here, turn on server latency, and it will show you your ping in milliseconds while you're playing, and you can look for ping spikes and just check, is my game running as it should be? Do I need to sort out my internet a little bit? This is very handy to have on. And that is currently all of my recommended best settings for COD Modern Warfare 2 Beta on console. If you have any questions, then leave them down below, and also make sure you subscribe for more awesome videos coming very soon on the Modern Warfare 2 Beta, the Warzone 2 gameplay that will be coming out towards the end of the year, and of course the full release of Modern Warfare 2 as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.